In this video, we are going to learn about conditional sentences. To understand conditional sentences in a better way, we should be knowing the meaning of clause, main clause, and subordinate clause. What is a clause? Clause is a group of words with a subject and verb unit. A main clause is a clause that can form a complete sentence standing alone, having a subject and predicate. Main clause is also called as an independent clause. The next one is the subordinate clause. Subordinate clause is a clause typically introduced by a conjunction that forms part of and is dependent on a main clause. See the example. If you work hard, you will get good marks. In this sentence, you will get good marks is the main clause because it has a subject and a verb and it stands alone. It can give a complete meaning of its own while standing alone. But see the subordinate clause. The subordinate clause begins with a subordinating conjunction if in this sentence. And when you look at this subordinate clause, you can clearly understand that it cannot give a complete meaning of its own, but it has to depend on a main clause. If you work hard has meaning, but it is not complete. But when we read the main clause and subordinate clause together, the subordinate clause makes more sense. So that is the difference between a main clause and a subordinate clause. Now coming to the conditional sentences. Conditional sentences are a type of subordinate clause commonly introduced by conjunctions if or unless. So these subordinating clauses or conditional sentences can come before the main clause or after it. The following forms are also used to introduce conditional clauses. So in conditional clauses, other than the subordinating conjunctions if and unless, we can also find conjunctions like even if, unless, in case, in the event, provided, as long as, whether, or. Look at the examples. If it rains, comma, we shall remain at home. In this sentence, we shall remain at home is the main clause and if it rains is the subordinating clause. Even if you run, you won't be in time for school. Don't go unless I tell you to go. So in this sentence, the subordinate clause comes after the main clause don't go. In case you go out, please bring some sweets for me. In the event of the conference being postponed, I'll let you know. We shall proceed provided the weather is fine. As long as you are healthy, you can run. Whether you are rich or poor, I will always remember you. So I believe you have now understood the difference between a main clause and a subordinating clause. Now coming to the conditional sentences. The first one we are going to learn is zero conditional. What is a zero conditional sentence? When we talk about general truths, we have to use simple present tense in the if clause and simple present tense in the main clause, and this is called as zero conditional sentence. So in the if clause, you'll be talking about a condition and in the main clause, you'll be talking about the result. See the examples given below. If you freeze water, it becomes solid. If you freeze water is the condition, and when the condition is fulfilled, the result would be water becoming solid. So if you freeze water, automatically we know that water will become solid because it's a general truth. The grass gets wet if it rains. We all know that if it rains, the grass will automatically get wet. So these are all general truths. So when we speak about general truth, we have to use zero conditional, which means we have to use simple present tense in the if clause and simple present tense in the main clause. Now, to type 2 condition. Type 1 condition. Type 1 condition talks about a possible condition and its probable result. So we use type 1 conditions to describe conditions which may or may not be fulfilled. But the condition to be fulfilled is real. That is why such a statement is often called an open or real conditional. So type 1 condition is called as open or real conditional. In this type, we have to use simple present tense in the if clause and future tense in the main clause. So in the if clause, we have to mention the condition to be satisfied, and in the main clause, we should mention the likely outcome. Simple present tense here doesn't mean only simple present. It also means that we can use all the tenses present in the present tense, which means we can use simple present tense, present continuous, present perfect continuous tense. In the if clause, say the example, if you study hard, you will succeed. If he is standing in the rain, he will catch cold. He is standing. Present continuous tense is used here. If she has arrived at the station, present perfect tense is used in the conditional clause and future tense is used in the main clause. She will be here soon. If he has been traveling all night, he will need rest. If he has been traveling is present perfect continuous tense. He will need rest is future tense. If I can afford it, I will buy it. Here in the if clause or the conditional clause, modal auxiliary can is used and in the main clause future tense is used. So in type 1 conditional sentences, we have to use simple present tense in the if clause and future tense in the main clause. And when should we use this type of condition? When we are talking about possible condition and its probable result, we have to use type 1. Now to type 2. Type 2 conditional sentences talks about a hypothetical condition and its probable result. So type 2 talks about a hypothetical condition and its probable result. Type 2 conditionals. In type 2 conditionals, if is followed by a past tense or could. The main clause is normally formed with would, though should can be used instead of would after I and we. So, in the if clause, we have to use past tense, and in the main clause, we have to use would or should. If the subject is I and we have to use should. See the example. If he was taller, he would become a policeman. This is a hypothetical condition because he is not taller and he cannot become a policeman. We are talking about a hypothetical condition. That's why past verb, that is written in the if clause and would is used in the main clause. In purely imaginary statements, we have to use were instead of was. See the example. If I were a bird, I would fly. In this sentence, we have used were instead of was. Usually, we have to use was with I. But because it is a purely imaginary statement, where is used instead of was. We have to use could, might, and ought to in the main clause to show ability, possibility, and duty. See the example. If you were absent, you ought to send an application. The next one is type 3 conditional sentences. In type 3 conditional sentences, the verb in the if clause is in the past perfect tense. The verb in the main clause is in the perfect conditional. The time is past and the condition cannot be fulfilled because the action in the if clause did not take place. Let me repeat, please listen very carefully. The time is past and the condition cannot be fulfilled. Why? Because the action in the if clause did not take place. So, see the example. If I had worked harder, which means he didn't work hard in the future. So, if he had worked harder, I would have got good marks. So, type 3 conditional sentences talk about an unreal past condition and its probable result in the past. See the other two examples also. If I had won the match, I would have been happy. So, from this sentence, we can understand that he didn't win the match. Okay, see the next example. If I had lived in the Stone Age, I would have been a hunter, which means he is not living in the Stone Age, so he is not a hunter. Is it clear, students? So these are the three types of conditional sentences, and this topic is a very important topic. I want everybody to turn to your English grammar book and do the book back exercises. Go through the video again and again for your better understanding. Thank you, students.